Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Jason and Derek here.
Derek, today we're going to
This is our final one.
Final one. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as
And
well.
your family. We're going to talk about the biggest people of 2022.
Let's do it.
The 5 stars who changed the celebrity landscape.
The mere mention of their name is a blinding beacon of light. That's how I think of these celebrities. These are not necessarily story-driven. They're the names that when you mention them, carry a story.
And by the way,
does that make sense? The story can be weak. It's the name that leads.
It does. And not only that, you could name just by first name all 5 of these people, and nobody would have any doubt who you're talking to.
I think you're pretty right. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start out. So you and I, we've talked about this list. We agree on 5 and 4, although I think there's some, we left off Will Smith, for example.
Yes.
Could have been on the list. But 5 and 4 we agree on. 3, 2, and 1 I think you and I disagree on the order in which they're put. So
I think that's right.
Number 5, Rihanna. Talk about what Rihanna's year was like.
So what a year. So Rihanna has, in the past few years, been kind of quiet. You know, she's been dealing with her personal life, not in a bad way, but sort of, she got into a relationship with A$AP Rocky. She got pregnant and had a child, and she was quiet, not on the music scene. Well, all that stuff came to fruition this year. So this is why she had a huge year. She had a child, her first baby with A$AP Rocky, an adorable kid.
Yeah.
And she's back. She's back. And the way she came back was in the biggest fashion possible. She is going to headline the Super Bowl, and she had the song in one of the biggest movies of the year, Black Panther.
Yeah.
So Rihanna's back. We don't know if there's an album coming. I put her in the 5 spot because I wouldn't say it's a soft relaunch of Rihanna, but people are really waiting on a full album. She's one of the biggest Billboard stars in history.
So if you go back 10 years ago, she's right up there with Beyonce and Taylor Swift. And if you take their popularity now, she was the
gunning
biggest,
for Mariah Carey's records.
She was the biggest star in the world for a while, the biggest musician in the world for a long time. And then she disappeared, but by all accounts, really did a good job disappearing. Wanted to get out of the limelight, had her Fenty brand, which hugely popular, making tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars.
She got quieter, but much richer. That was what was interesting, because musically she wasn't making as much money, but her Fenty brand, it puts her in billionaire status.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so she's doing this without having to deal with being in the limelight all the time. You'd see her Giorgio Baldi once in a while. She dated the Toyota,
the heir to some sort of
dealership,
scion of a dealership. Yes,
Saudi,
very wealthy guy,
but
didn't need it. So
didn't need the money. She was just happy. And so we would get pictures of her like in on ocean sides and places, beautiful tropical locations. That's what we knew from Rihanna. All of a sudden, Rihanna's back. Yeah. We have new music coming out. We have the Super Bowl appearance. We're all expecting an album drop.
Yes.
It's a big deal for Rihanna.
I also think it's kind of interesting because, as we said, Fenty brand is big enough that Rihanna didn't have to come back, but the pull of celebrity is so strong. I'm not, this is not to call her thirsty, but the desire to be famous and what that sort of does for a person is there. It just drags you back in. She doesn't need to headline the Super Bowl. She's got more money, generational type money. But
no,
it
causes some people to get into music.
Adoration. Yeah,
the quest for fame causes some people to get into music or movies or do podcasts 5 days a week. There's all sorts of things that the quest for fame can do.
Our names and Rihanna's in the same sentence. I don't think you would ever see it. All right, let's move to the number 4 spot. And so Rihanna, sort of a cheerful reemergence.
Yeah.
The next
just
guy
by
on the
first
list,
names.
Yes. This is Just Johnny.
Just Johnny. So,
Just Johnny.
And I'm not sure that Just Johnny would have resonated prior to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
But Johnny gets into the craziest legal battle of, I think, the last 20 years, maybe the most notorious, the most pop culture legal battle with Amber Heard.
Hard to have a one-name Johnny breakthrough as your one name. It's
really
the most common name on earth, potentially.
Right. So he obviously has this enormous, consequential, and watched trial with Amber Heard, where it's a cross-defamation lawsuit. They're both suing each other for defamation. During the trial, I think the way things started out, if we remember back, is that everybody thought Amber Heard was the wronged party. He had actually lost a very similar trial on the same issues in the UK. He was very strange.
Yes.
She was far less well known, and was only known as the beauty from Aquaman. And so we went into this thing thinking, as we tend to do, and I think rightfully so, that women who claim abuse are most often telling the truth, almost always. And so I think we felt going in that Johnny Depp was going to be found liable, number 1, and number 2 was a bad dude.
Yeah.
As the testimony started coming up, not everybody changed their minds, but lots and lots of people. And I think if the comments that we got to our podcast and on our website are any indication, really very few people were pro Amber by the end. They were all pro Johnny.
I remain, I believe much of Amber Heard's testimony, so I was on the wrong side of this, but I was wrong, frankly. I mean, the tide has turned. He has really sort of reintroduced himself into mainstream celebrity culture in the wake of this after winning this trial. Here's my big takeaway from this. I have sort of one major takeaway. It is fascinating that he went through with it. As lawyers, we see defamation threats all the time. You see letters that are sent, but they never seem to be something that you'll follow through with for one big reason. It's messy. It's as messy as can be to sort of have witnesses talk about the veracity of statements because it brings up all the nasty stuff that you want to just sort of put behind you.
It's also
in the news cycle.
In our system, in our legal system, it's very, very, very hard to prove defamation, especially against a famous person. I read something once. It was said, you can count on one hand the number of celebrities who are found liable for defamation.
Yes.
Because in our system, our First Amendment, based on the First Amendment, the Supreme Court has said that if you say a celebrity, in order to prove a case of defamation against them, much so not just the person said something that was false, not even they should have known better, but they had it with malice. They knew it was false when they said it, and they said it with the intent to harm you.
Yes.
And it's an incredibly high legal standard. In this case, the jury found that he had proven not only that she said something that was defamatory, which you and I don't necessarily agree with ultimately, but that she did it on purpose, knowing it was false, with the intent to hurt him, with malice, and they found her liable.
Yeah, and look, this was a fascinating case because it ushered in, I wouldn't say the end of the Me Too era, but sort of a paradigm that changed in the Me Too era. Where
it's a really good point.
Do you know what? So before this point, it was, as you said, victims were telling their stories, and you were presumptively to believe them. He played this all out, and he said, "You know what? Not everyone is telling the truth. I was in a relationship, and she maligned my character during this movement, and I'm standing up for it." And he won. And that was fascinating. This could have been it felt like a referendum on that movement as much as an individual trial about Johnny and Amber.
It's a great point. All right, now we're going to get into the debate. So producer Wild put this list together, which is, we'll take him out back later because this is just not accurate here. So number 3, he has Taylor Swift on this list. And the reason
you think too low, huh?
I think it's too low. I honestly think she is the biggest celebrity of the year. What she has done.
You used her last name though. You didn't just say Taylor.
No, Taylor. What she has done, the records that she has set. I mean, it's really remarkable. She has surpassed, and I'm not talking about anything except sales.
Yes,
her concerts. She has surpassed Beyonce. Surpassed Adele, surpassed whoever else might be in that league.
If you're a Billboard geek, she's like dominating so many lists. Your mouth is agape. If you're someone like Eric Colley, you're just stunned.
She has surpassed Drake. What she has done this year.
The top 10 hits. Never been done. Taylor Swift does it.
If you look at the Billboard top 10, every single one was a Taylor Swift song at the same time. It's never been done before. She has set every record. She took down Ticketmaster. Mm-hmm. Her sales were so robust. People desperately wanted her sales so much. The secondary market of her tickets or her concerts were selling for 10 times face value, 20 times face value.
She crashed Ticketmaster.
She crashed Ticketmaster. And so, Ticketmaster said historically unprecedented demand. So say whatever you want about Taylor Swift. There's a lot of haters out there. There's a lot of Swifties as well. A lot of haters out there. There's no way to challenge the statement that for a moment in time, she is the most popular artist that has ever been.
Look, I'm going to make my counterpoint because if this were a list of who is the most successful, she would have a real shot at the number 1 spot, and it'd be hard to argue against her given her Billboard achievements and her sales. This is just the list of the biggest years. And look, Midnight's is huge. Her tour crashed Ticketmaster. I will acknowledge all of these things. But the fact of the matter is Taylor Swift herself as a name has been more relevant in the past than she is this year. In my opinion, when Taylor Swift was the zeitgeist was during the era of Blank Space, 1989. Those albums, I think, will have a sort of historical legacy. Much more than Midnight's. Midnight's is
the one that outsold them 3-1.
Yeah, it just feels like those aren't what you will remember Taylor Swift for. In her, we always do this game. When you write the obituary of Taylor Swift, will you mention Midnight's, or what will be the first song you mention in her sort of the first line of her obituary?
Well,
I know that's morbid, but
I don't think
you'd say Midnight's.
No, you wouldn't. There would be players going to play.
You would say,
Shake It Off. Right?
That's right. Shake It Off.
But that's
her
because
song.
it's first. That's the one she broke into the main. I know she had for all the Swifties. I know she had huge hits before that.
Yes.
That
We don't
was
need
the
to bring
one-
in Mel.
That was the one that made her an enormous mainstream star who everybody in the world had heard of her. I get that.
Yes.
But that's because that's the reason that we'd say that, because it was the one that broke her through.
Yes.
But this album sold more than any of those albums.
It did.
And granted, some of that was capitalizing on the past name recognition she had developed over the years, and therefore. But I just think that coming off of Evermore, which was also an enormous album, all sorts of Grammys, for her to come up with this album,
Your point is the proof's in the pudding. I mean, the numbers back her up.
I also think she's so influential at this point. She's the most influential artist that there is right now. She is the person that everybody wants to be around and be with and associate themselves with. I just think it's hard to say that when you say you're the biggest selling artist of all time, it's hard to say that person's not the biggest person of the year.
That's fair enough. I want to contextualize really quickly, though, her Billboard records. I mean, right before this, a couple years before this, I think, maybe within 2 years, Drake had 9 of the top 10 songs. Yeah. So the records are sort of different. I don't want to minimize them at all, but streaming has changed the game. I don't think she's as big as the Beatles, who held the top 5
she's
spots.
Not, but it's a good point. Artists today, there's so much democratization of popularity and celebrity. Artists today can never be as big as they were once upon a time. Right?
Yeah, we don't have monoculture in the same way that we once had.
But because the way the music industry worked, and artists would release one song at a time, you never would have 10 in a row. So she's only in that respect, one respect, we're only comparing her against modern artists. The Beatles were 10 times bigger than Taylor Swift at the height of her popularity.
That's right.
The fandom was insane. But that said,
you play in the era you play.
You play in the era.
I don't know if Babe Ruth is better than Aaron Judge, but you play in the era you play.
All right. So numbers 2 and 1, both heels.
Both heels. So that's why I think we have our last feel good story with Taylor Swift. I guess your mileage may vary on Taylor Swift, but I think the last two are indisputably heels. In the number 2 spot, I'm putting Kanye West. And I'll tell you why I put Kanye West. Obviously, a gigantic year of going off the rails. I mean, he finalizes his divorce from Kim, and things just really, really take a turn for the worse. I don't think anyone would really defend what happened. He has been on an anti-Semitic tirade. He wore a White Lives Matter shirt at a fashion show. He'd been on with Alex Jones and sort of doubled down on all of these very strange theories. He lost his deals with Adidas and Balenciaga. I mean, he is a shattered shell of his former self, and it all seems due to, whatever your thoughts, he's going through something. I don't want to get into a debate about mental illness, but to leave Kanye West off the list would or not put him in the top 2 spot would just be sort of ignoring the reality of his name driving so many stories throughout the year.
It's hard to ignore how influential he has been in terms of driving the narrative of the year. That's undoubtedly true. It's not just his anti-Semitism that then gave rise to Kyrie Irving. It gave rise to an entire debate around anti-Semitism about Jews in Hollywood. That old trope resurfacing. An
extended downfall like this. Have we seen one of a Kanye magnitude where it's not just a fall from grace? It's a played out.
It's a played out fall from grace. By the way, he's still falling as the year ends.
Yeah,
he's gone from a fortune of well over $1 billion, estimated at well over $1 billion, to one that's less than $500 million, which obviously still.
Massive amounts of money.
Massive amounts of money considering the rest of his life. He never spent the rest of his life, but he's a lot less rich than he once upon a time was. He's a lot less popular. There are serious efforts to boycott him. We've talked about that. I don't think anybody ever truly gets boycotted. I don't even think R. Kelly is truly boycotted. But nevertheless, he's fallen from great heights.
I want to make a prediction. Next year and in subsequent years, I don't want to say never, but let's talk about next year. Will Kanye West be a relevant topic of discussion, or has he really situated himself in the margins of relevance now? Unless he comes back and has this sort of mea culpa, if he stays on this path, will Kanye be a topic in the same way?
Yeah, I'd have to say yes. Look, just because it's an unfair comparison to R. Kelly, but R. Kelly hasn't produced great music in 20 years.
Yeah.
Kanye West, by all accounts, is a musical genius that doesn't come along very often.
Yeah.
And if he continues to create great music, there's an audience for that music. And he's got to shut up and not make everything about himself, which is big. But I think he'll do that. He's getting older and he get tired, but he suffers under some severe mental illnesses. But I do think it's very possible that he's still back in a relevant and not necessarily a negative topic of conversation.
That's a great point. I mean, artists like him are an album away from reemerging as the Kanye West of old. I don't think he's at a point where we can forget what happened.
And that'll never happen.
That'll never happen.
Yeah.
It'll always be part of his sort of legacy now. But I remember what he did in this newsroom, and he moved on from that. It was certainly one of the biggest topics. We sort of see him in a different way ever since that moment in our newsroom. But he reemerged and sold Yeezys and was Balenciaga. So I think it could happen again. The last guy I have on our list is who, Jason?
Well, Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it's hard to quibble with having Elon Musk as the number one person of 2022, a newsmaker, with the exception of Kanye, I think, probably created the most news, both positive and negative. His Tesla cars, people poop on Elon Musk all the time. The Tesla, they're selling more units than ever before. It's still a juggernaut in the automotive industry. The technologies that he has created have revolutionized the industry. Every other car company is still trying desperately to catch what.
But this year's not about Tesla. What's this year
about?
This
year is all about Twitter.
The acquisition of Twitter.
The acquisition of Twitter. So Elon Musk obviously puts up this almost on a lark, $44 billion, vastly overvaluing what Twitter is worth. Then wants to back out of it. Twitter says not so fast. There's threatened litigation, and ultimately Elon Musk caves and acquires Twitter for $44 billion.
A company that's maybe worth less than $20 billion.
Yes.
And knows he overpaid and has publicly said he overpaid, but loves Twitter.
The ultimate hubris, right?
Yeah. So I think the reason I put him number one, and look, you can debate Kanye and Elon in some sense, but Elon Musk, to me, has positioned himself as the guy who drives headlines akin to Donald Trump. Just always, anything he says. Kanye still has to be erratic and say outlandish things to sort of dominate the news. Elon Musk, just his mere presence. He talks about Dogecoin goes up. He buys Twitter. Whatever he says on Twitter is a massive news
And by the
story.
way, buying Twitter drove that stock price for a long time. Some people tried to capitalize on that.
I sure did. Didn't actually execute on it, but I had a great theory. But do you agree with that? He sort of occupies this Trumpian role now where not his politics necessarily, but that what he says is immediately an object of fascination. Trump had that position for a while.
Let me tell you where I agree with you and where I disagree with you. I agree with everything you just said, that he has this ability to move markets. He has there's a fascination with him. The things he says really do impact people, their finances, their way they think about things. He's exceptionally bright. And over the last, he and Steve Jobs are the great futurists and technologists of the last 50 years. Really incredible. That said, I think that we're in a little bit of a bubble in that we talk about him as much as we do. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think Kanye and Taylor Swift are talked about by all 360 million Americans on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Huge exaggeration, hyperbole there, but you get my point. Elon Musk is talked about by a much smaller swath of people. You and I love these kinds of things. You and I dive deep into Elon Musk. I just don't think he has the resonance with Joe America that the others have.
I think that's quite true. I think what you're saying is people, the name Kanye West, the name Taylor Swift, Johnny Depp, Rihanna, these are bigger names, but it's remarkable to see a CEO sort of cross into their world as much as Elon has. Now, I don't think he's as big as them, but I don't think we've ever seen. There have been superstar CEOs in the past. Steve Jobs is probably another name that sort of, but he didn't cross over to pop culture. He was sort of a figure in a black turtleneck, but people didn't think about his life or his personal life in the same ways. Elon Musk, we've been fascinated with Grimes. He sort of is in pop culture as well as a business titan. Jeff Bezos, I compare him to Jeff Bezos, who is trying to do this, but never able to occupy the same level of attention, notwithstanding his best efforts to fly into space, have a girlfriend who's sort of flashy. He can't sort of achieve what Elon has achieved.
In my mind. It goes back to almost Lindbergh kind of thing.
Yes.
Or, these people who have crossed over from this, the hierarchy of wealth into a pop culture where everybody knows who they are and talks about them.
It's sort of fascinating, right?
It's really fascinating.
I also think
so if this was the list of the most fascinating people of 2022, I think maybe you'd get there.
I know, our criteria has changed. We should have gone with the criteria at top because we've changed it for each person on our list, but this has been a lot of fun.
All right, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining us on the podcast in 2022. We love having you here. And
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We'll see you next year.